Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, Judge James Boasberg, the Chief Judge of Federal District Court in Washington, D.C., just issued an order setting an evidentiary hearing to try to decide if Kristi Noem or one or more other Trump administration officials intentionally defied his order, such that they should be held in contempt. His order involved trying to put a stop to what turned out to be an unconstitutional deportation of a plane full of Venezuelan immigrants to El Salvador to be delivered to a terrorism prison, CCOT, in El Salvador. Judge Boasberg set a hearing at which he will examine witnesses from the government to see who, if anyone, intentionally defied his order, such that he should consider holding them in contempt. So friends, I just sat down with independent journalist Adam Klasfeld of All Rise News to talk about Judge Boasberg's new order and to discuss what this upcoming evidentiary hearing might look like. I hope you enjoy this extended conversation with Adam Klasfeld. All right, welcome everybody. Happy Tuesday afternoon. I have with me my friend Adam Klasfeld from All Rise News. He is a gavel-to-gavel reporter like no other, bringing everybody sort of real-time insights regarding what goes on inside the courtroom. He attends so many of the big consequential hearings of the day. And today we decided to jump on to talk about a new order that was just entered by the Chief Judge of Federal District Court in Washington, D.C., James Jeb, he goes by Jeb Boasberg, in connection with the possible contempt, possible violation of the Trump administration. And it looks like they're narrowing it down to possibly Kristi Noem, who may be responsible for defying Judge Boasberg's order. But he just issued an order in the case that is pretty consequential. So, Adam, first of all, welcome, and thank you for jumping on with us. Can you kind of bring everybody up to speed, I guess, starting with March 15th, when everything kind of broke loose in this, what seems to be hastily put together deportation of Venezuelans to El Salvador and ultimately into that terrorism prison, CCOT, in El Salvador?
Absolutely. March 15th is the consequential date, the date of an emergency hearing before Judge Boasberg to determine whether to order the flights back. And that's exactly what Judge Boasberg did on March 15th. There were hundreds of Venezuelans and others hustled onto planes bound for CCOT prison in El Salvador, that terrorism prison where many reported torture. And ever since that time, instead, after the planes landed, ignoring the order of Judge Boasberg, there has been litigation. It started out with appellate litigation. Let me take a step back. It started out with litigation over what to do about the alleged defiance. And Judge Boasberg could not have tailored a more narrow order. What he effectively said is, I find probable cause that that my orders have been violated and probable cause for criminal contempt. That initiated a process to find out who violated his orders in particular. But that inspired appellate litigation. In the interim, I'm sure everyone watching this right now remembers when the whistleblower, Erez Ruveni, stepped forward and gave a little bit of the backstory and said that Emil Bovee, who was Trump's former lawyer, then a senior Justice Department official, instructed prosecutors to be ready to tell the judiciary F you. In the interim, Emil Bovee, his juggernaut to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, is not slowed. The Senate refuses to get more information about it, the GOP-controlled Senate. And the two Trump-appointed judges in the D.C. Circuit overturned the probable cause finding. However, the en banc DC Circuit, without disturbing that order, says that order allows Judge Boasberg to continue the contempt proceedings, finds essentially by a majority that he did nothing wrong, contrary to what this three-judge panel said. And this week, Judge Boasberg is going full steam ahead after getting two declarations, one by Emil Bovey, now a Third Circuit judge, and Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem. And we'll go into the particulars of that order soon.
Yeah, so what a great recap of kind of where we started and where we are presently. And I think, there were some jurisdictional niceties about whether Judge Boasberg and Washington, D.C. was the proper forum to bring this challenge. But the bottom line is Judge Boasberg is able to explore whether the Trump administration defied his court orders such that he should contemplate, contempt against one or more Trump officials. And let me just kind of put an exclamation point on some of what you said and some of what we expect to hear, because in this new order by Judge Boasberg, he orders that two people, at least for openers, will be testifying at hearings that will be conducted on consecutive days. Those two people are first, as you mentioned, Erez Ruveni, who is they call him a whistleblower. He was just a long time, well-regarded DOJ lawyer who was trying to do his level best. And what he said, I pulled it up in some of the reporting, is that Bove, who I believe was then the deputy attorney general or the acting deputy attorney general, said that the planes filled with Venezuelans, who the Supreme Court has since, I believe, indicated did not have their full due process rights honored. Bove said those planes need to take off no matter what. And then, after a pause, this is the retelling by Ruvini, he also told everyone in attendance, if some court should issue an order preventing that, we may have to consider telling the court, and I quote, fuck you. That's not the stuff we expect to hear from attorneys general, the number two person in the Department of Justice, who himself was previously a federal prosecutor and who now, horrifically, in my opinion, is actually a Federal Circuit Court of Appeals judge. But against that backdrop, Adam, let's talk about the new order and what Judge Boasberg has now put in place with respect to the upcoming hearings.
Absolutely. So I have his order in front of me, and he starts it out by saying that the government has submitted cursory declarations from Secretary Kristi Noem, and then at the Department of Justice, attorneys then at the Department of Justice who have advised her. And he said, and I quote Judge Boasberg, as this declaration does not provide enough information for the court to determine whether her decision was a willful violation of the court's order, the court cannot at this juncture find probable cause that her actions constituted criminal contempt, hence this hearing. So by submitting a declaration that looks like this is the cursory declaration submitted by Kristi Noem, disclosing only that she made a decision to continue the transfer under the Alien Enemies Act, and that she received legal advice. He is bringing forward this hearing. It recalls the meme, congratulations, you played yourself. She didn't give enough information, and so he is searching for more information. And who does he go to? The people who's, since the time of Erez Ruveni's declaration, where he revealed that exchange that you talked about, Glenn, he's also been on 60 Minutes. We know his story. It's a dramatic story. It's going to be now testified to under oath should the petitioners produce him on Monday. And also the next day, the judge will hear from current acting Justice Department lawyer, Drew Ensign. So that is what this order. It has 2 days of hearings up ahead, where we're going to get some answers, and the stakes are huge. Will a federal judge find that the Secretary of Homeland Security, that there's probable cause to find her in criminal contempt. This now has, as you noted, a sitting Third Circuit judge mixed up in this, who also submitted a declaration. I have it right here, highlighted in part. Emil Bovey, what will the judge find? A federal appellate court judge, not in his jurisdiction, but in another jurisdiction, that his role in this was when he was PA DAG, when he was a senior Justice Department attorney reporting to Todd Blanche. So this is an extraordinary ruling, and this entire saga that began in March, that goes right to the core of whether the Trump government is going to follow or thumb their nose at the courts, is really coming to a head.
And if I recall accurately, during his confirmation hearings, not to go off on Emil Bove for all that long, when he was asked whether he recalled telling the assembled DOJ lawyers that if, judges issued rulings that were not to their liking or orders that were not to their liking, they would have to consider saying F you to the judge. I believe his answer was, I don't recall, which frankly was confirmation enough for me. And let me add parenthetically, because this has always stuck in my craw in the Trump era. I don't recall is not a perjury proof answer. Adam, if I'm put on the stand, either in Congress, and it doesn't even have to be under oath in Congress, or in a grand jury, or in a trial, and I am asked the following question, Mr. Kirshner, what's your middle name? I don't recall. And my middle name is relevant. It is material. It is of consequence to the issue being decided, being litigated. I've just committed the crime of perjury, or in Congress, a 1001 violation named after the federal criminal statute, 18 USC 1001. So, no, I do not recall is not a perjury proof answer. If you do recall, and I am quite sure Emil Bove recalled what he said in that room full of DOJ lawyers. Of course, Mr. Ruvini has come forward and has told what he recalled happening in that meeting. Famously, now he appeared on 60 Minutes, but this is going to be different because he's going to be under oath. He's going to be examined. We'll talk about what those examinations might look like in a minute, but presumably he's going to tell his story again, consistent with what we all saw him say on 60 Minutes. And then let's turn to the next witness. The first witness, as you said, Erez Ruvini, is going to testify at 9:30 in the morning on December 15th. But then we get to the 16th, and it's Drew Ensign. He's going to testify at 2 p.m. And, he's got a little bit of baggage that he's bringing into the courtroom and to the witness stand with him. What is it that he has been accused of in some of the other cases in which he has appeared as a DOJ lawyer?
Well, he is the kind of go-to DOJ senior attorney. He has argued in this case, which is why he's being brought to the stand. If I recall correctly, he's also been in Kilmar Abrego Garcia's civil proceedings. And so there is, in this case, the history of he had been accused of, and correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, misleading the courts in this very case about what went down, because he had been there was this inquiry about whether there was the defiance of his order, and there were questions right off the bat. Was the order communicated to people within the DOJ? Has he been who was listening in on the public line? One of the things about Judge Boasberg that he's been doing is he's been making public lines available for people to listen in. I remember listening to it in real time. So were members of the Department of Justice. And if you look at Emil Bovey's a declaration here, he says that he monitored developments in the case. He doesn't say explicitly, I was listening in on the public line, but it's quite possible that he was doing that. I want to add one thing about what you said about that, and I remember that testimony vividly before the Senate. I remember Senator Adam Schiff putting Emil Bovee right on the spot and saying, "Isn't that something you would remember?
Yeah.
Isn't that something that you would?" Was that a comment that you make every day when advising prosecutors in your office? And he just ducked and weaved around the question, and that, of course, raised the question: why didn't he just deny it? Because he must. Was there a tape? Was there a piece of evidence? And we found, with the flood of evidence from Ruvini's, his notes, his emails from the time, documented his conversations about Bovey's legal advice. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if all of that comes up on the stand, if those exhibits that came before the Senate are once again shown in a court of law, and maybe even new documents that we haven't seen yet.
And here is some of the problems I see coming Drew Enson's way. As you point out, not only is there a suggestion that in this case, he may have misled or not been completely candid with Judge Boasberg. Specifically, he said he wasn't aware of any plans to deport the Venezuelans, even though these deportation efforts were actually underway and being rushed through. I think there was a question about whether he was being candid with the court, but he's got priors because in the Abrego Garcia case, Judge Sines said that Ensign showed a lack of candor, that he failed to act in good faith at times. She didn't outright accuse him of lying or making misrepresentations, but she was highly critical about the nature that of his representation of the people as a Department of Justice lawyer. But then here's another one. This is a headline from the Washington Post. Our viewers may remember that there were some Guatemalan children that were rousted from bed in the middle of the night and stuffed onto planes in another hasty deportation mission. Now, fortunately, some lawyers representing these Guatemalan children, these unaccompanied minors, managed to get to court right quick and put a stop to it. The headline is, a Trump appointed judge says a Trump lawyer, meaning Drew Ensign, who appeared in that case, made false claims in court to hastily deport Guatemalan children. Here's the thing. When you put a witness on the stand, examination on that witness's credibility is as wide and broad as examination on virtually every other topic. And so I think Drew Ensign could properly be cross-examined about these, what I call priors, but these other instances where federal court judges have been very critical of his representations in court. That could spell real trouble for Drew Ensign at this hearing.
Absolutely. And I'll add to that point. We talk about these being Venezuelan migrants. One of them was not, and his name was Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And he was, remember, the admission by Erez Ruvini before he was fired that Abrego was put on the plane by mistake, not acknowledging the order that forbid his deportation to El Salvador because he feared persecution there. He is from El Salvador, and he fled El Salvador for the United States. So, and a little bit of background to your point about Judge Sines. One of the things that Judge Sines has been outraged about at multiple hearings, we've had this sort of Groundhog's Day experience in her courtroom where she orders the testimony of an official with knowledge of whatever that she's looking for information about, whether it's plans to deport Abrego to Ghana or to Uganda. Who has information about this? And at least 3 or more times in a row, you had the government bring forward a witness who doesn't have any knowledge about it, and it's revealed that he has no knowledge about it over the course of examination. That shows why Judge Sines has been so frustrated with him and why that Tuesday hearing could be so explosive.
Now let's talk about what the hearings might look like on Monday and Tuesday. It's a little unusual because you're going to have a judge, I believe, actually examining the witnesses, asking the questions because he's trying to determine, if he should move forward with contempt proceedings, and if so, against which Trump administration officials. So what I will say is that I have seen Jeb Boasberg examine witnesses before. In fact, when we tried a very emotionally charged murder case together, I supervised Jeb Boasberg when he was a federal homicide prosecutor at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, and I was chief of homicide, and we tried a case together. So you want to get the measure of somebody, be their trial partner in a double homicide involving two senior citizens who were a brother and sister living out their golden years in their joint household who were slaughtered in their own home. Judge Boasberg and I tried that case together. I've seen him examine witnesses. I've seen him cross-examine witnesses, and he is about as good as it gets. I am going to hope to be in the courtroom both days. I want to see him examine the witnesses, and then I want to see the attorneys for the plaintiffs examine the witnesses. I want to see what the DOJ does with respect to the witnesses who are expected to testify. But, I will drop this little nugget in here, and we'll see if it comes to fruition. I believe Drew Ensign may end up having a Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination with respect to his testimony if he misled the court in some respect, or if the cross-examination about his conduct in other cases, which will be relevant on his credibility, he may have misrepresented something to those judges. So this could be not only a highly charged, but a really unusual hearing, given the nature of these two witnesses who are testifying.
Absolutely. And that's a very good point. One of the things that I find really worth noting with this case is just how deliberative Judge Boasberg has been at every turn. Let's put into perspective what the litigation that went up to the D.C. Circuit was about. It was about him opening an inquiry saying that there's probable cause for criminal contempt, and now we're going to find out who the contemnors are and how they could purge contempt. It wasn't a finding, it didn't start a prosecution, it started a process. And that's how he's handled that, even amidst this attack by Trump's Department of Justice and Trump himself, even as GOP senators are lining up to agitate for his impeachment for issuing rulings they don't like, even as they lie to the public, frankly, about what he did in connection with the January 6th investigation. They say that he authorized spying of senators. Not at all. He had authorized a subpoena to find out who Trump and Rudy Giuliani were calling while the Capitol was under attack. And under all that fire, under the filing of a frivolous complaint against him to the D.C. Circuit, the same D.C. Circuit that by a majority endorsed his actions and said he's been handling this case capably. Even under all that fire, he is taking a very deliberate process. He hasn't issued another probable cause finding. He is ordering witness testimony with key witnesses. And I think that's just an emblem of how he's been handling this case so far.
And lest anybody forget, James Boasberg was first appointed as a judge by George W. Bush. Thereafter, he was appointed to the federal court. At first, he was a judge in the Superior Court for the District of Columbia. Second time, he was appointed by President Obama. I can say he is somebody who was universally highly regarded on both sides of the aisle, as they say, until the age of Trump, when it became all the rage to just attack every judge that rules against you, they're attacking Reagan-appointed judges and H.W. appointed judges as being radical left-wing lunatics. Come on. That only fools the gullible, but,
Right.
Nothing could be further from the truth. Any kind of an accusation that Jeb Boasberg is biased one way or another. He's right down the middle, and all he cares about is the facts, the law, and the Constitution, in my experience. So I very much look forward to the hearings. I know you said you're going to be covering another trial. You won't be in D.C. covering these hearings next week, but I hope to be. So safe travels next week. Thank you for jumping on. And, if anything breaks during the remainder of this week, let's consider jumping on again.
Absolutely. Sounds great, Glenn. Looking forward to it.
And let me add, as always, that if you'll click over and give Adam a follow or subscribe to him on Substack, All Rise News. As I say, it's terrific gavel to gavel coverage, the kind of stuff you are not going to get from corporate media or legacy media. You're only going to get it here on independent media. So please consider following and subscribing to Adam here on Substack.
Thank you so much. I'll say the same. I am a subscriber to Glenn. Love your work. Love doing these lives. And we're going to be at different parts of the map covering important court cases next week. So I hope to catch up with you on what you saw in court and vice versa.
Great. Let's do it. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you at tonight's community meeting at 8:30.